We know it today as the Battle of Bunker Hill. Yet most of the fighting took place just south of there, on Breed's Hill. It was June 17, 1775. By the day's end, the redcoats would have the field. The cost, however, would be great. When the gunsmoke cleared, the British counted their dead and wounded. Their casualties were more than 3 times what they had suffered 2 months earlier when they lost at Concord, and more than 3 times what the colonists had suffered at Breed's and Bunker Hills. The British were shocked. As for the Patriots, they had lost the day, but they knew they had struck a terrible blow. American confidence was on the rise. The battles of Lexington and Concord were fought on April 19, 1775. In the 2 months following, no fighting had broken out between the British and the Massachusetts Patriots. But the war was still escalating. On April 24, 1775, colonial rebels in New Bern, North Carolina, seized 6 cannons from the governor's palace. In Williamsburg, Virginia, the British had seized all the gunpowder in the town's magazine. On May 2nd, Patrick Henry led the Hanover County militia in a march on the colonial capital. The next month, Governor Dunmore fled the governor's palace, leaving the government in the hands of the Virginia Patriots. On May 10th, Ethan Allen and his Green Mountain Boys executed a surprise attack and captured Fort Ticonderoga in New York. Among the Patriots who defeated the British that day was Benedict Arnold. Back in Massachusetts, over 14,000 militiamen had gathered around Boston. They were anticipating another battle. Their immediate goal was to contain the King's forces who occupied Boston. The British commander, General Thomas Gage, was under pressure to bring an end to the mounting colonial rebellion. He set his eyes on seizing 2 strategic positions on either end of Boston, Charlestown Heights to the north and Dorchester Heights to the south. The plan was leaked. On June 16, 1775, American General Artemas Ward, commander of colonial militia surrounding Boston, ordered General Israel Putnam and Colonel William Prescott to fortify Bunker Hill on Charlestown Neck, the peninsula just north of Boston and across the Charles River. 1,000 militiamen moved onto Bunker Hill. The men were farmers and tradesmen, mostly without formal military training. General Ward and Colonel Prescott determined that another hill south of Bunker would be better to fortify. Under the cloak of night and at the top of Breed's Hill, their men built a redoubt, an earthen fort. The structure had 4 sides, each was 6 feet high and 130 feet long. Only when the sun rose over Boston and Charlestown the next day, June 17th, did Gage and his staff discover what the American rebels had done on Breed's Hill. Gage dispatched 1,500 regulars to attack the Patriots, then sent another 700 as reserve forces. Their field commander was General William Howe. The forces rode their way across the river to Charlestown Neck. Howe ordered his men to attack the Breed's Hill redoubt in long lines formed parallel to the walls of the fort. As the British got within 150 feet, the Americans opened fire, mowing down entire rows of regulars. Howe's troops quickly retreated. On the second advance, his forces formed into columns perpendicular to the redoubt, making it more difficult to fire on many men in one volley. The regulars ran up the hill at a fast pace. Again, once they were within 150 feet, the rebels fired. And again, redcoats fell and the survivors turned and fled. The British launched a third attack. This time they made it over the walls of the redoubt. The hand-to-hand combat was fierce and bloody. The redcoats thrust their bayonets at their enemies. The Patriots struck back with muskets and clubs. The militiamen retreated to Bunker Hill, then left Charlestown Neck altogether. The British now controlled the battlefield and the northern heights above Boston, but they were stunned at the cost. 226 regulars were dead, another 828 wounded. altogether nearly half of General Howe's troops. On the American side, casualties were 1/3 of what the British suffered, 140 dead and 271 wounded. Among the American fatalities was Dr. Joseph Warren, the leader of Boston's network of spies. It was Warren who had dispatched Paul Revere to Lexington and Concord a few months earlier. The Patriots had lost the day. Still, they were encouraged. With the Atlantic Ocean between Britain and the colonies, the British could not easily replace their fallen soldiers. And perhaps more importantly, the Americans realized what the high casualties among the King's army meant. Not only could they hold their own against the British, they just might beat them and win the war.